Hello, this is Silvia Pavoni, investment editor of The Banker, and I'm talking to Roberto Paolino, who is the head of financial institutions and public sector for Citi. Roberto, you've been with Citi, we were saying, for 19 years, which is a long period of time, based, of course, in Brazil. I would imagine that you've seen a lot of changes in the country, up to a point now where Brazil is enjoying an extraordinary economic growth, which also requires high investments from the public sector in terms of developing the infrastructure. What is your point of view as a banker, and how is the public sector responding to these needs?
Yeah, certainly we have had very large change since I started in the bank in terms of looking over Brazil and its requirements and as a banking industry overall. But I think specifically if we look back over the infrastructure investment needed here in Brazil, 10 years ago we had an environment that was significantly different from now, where we had limited amount of projects or requirements that were in the pipe versus now anticipated investments over infrastructure for the next maybe 4 to 5 years of about $250 billion, depending on certain conditions and how we want to structure that. So I think the investment requirements are huge, and it's a condition that Brazil has achieved over the last few years. Certainly that there is large infrastructure changes needed, and many banks, including us, are trying to support that. The public sector with the Olympics, with World Cup, the demands itself that we have are going to require lots of capital, lots of funding, and it's going to have to change the dynamics of not going to a centralized location only, potentially as potential providers of that funding, as currently is the environment with the Development Bank of Brazil, BNDES. But certainly lots of things to come over the coming years.
We were also talking about the concerns over the creation of a potential credit bubble in Brazil. And you were saying that there are a lot of elements that should calm sentiments. Would you like to elaborate further?
Sure. I think it's obviously not easy to see a bubble when it's coming, because otherwise, others would have eye-spotted other things before. But I think in Brazil for now, there's obviously concern in making sure that everything is sound and robust, and the central bank and the regulators are constantly looking over it. But in our view, because of that, we're still at a point that there's a significant amount of opportunities and growth to come, and we really don't see a bubble happening, in the short term. There are measures that are needed to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that's something that is not what would be the best scenario for a growth in the country would take place in the short term, and that's where the measures that, for example, the central bank took recently, making sure that it requires the banks to put certain capital and certain conditions into consumer loans. But I think overall, the loans and the growth of Brazil have been based on the fact that really the economy has been growing, and then there is a substantial amount of wealth behind that growth on that.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. Appreciate it.